Emma believed in the strength of family. She believed in bonds that held firm through the storms of life, in laughter echoing around childhood walls, and in the kind of love that could withstand the weight of resentment. It was a belief she clung to, even as the shadows of her past loomed, whispering that some fractures could never be mended. The hospital room was cold, but the sterile white walls did nothing to mute the warmth of the newborn cradled in her arms. Ava, her daughter, her perfect, delicate little girl. Emma traced the soft curve of her daughter's cheek, memorizing the details of her tiny face. Despite the agony of labor, despite the exhaustion that threatened to pull her under, joy bloomed within her. She had done it. She had brought life into this world. And for a moment the past no longer mattered. The cracks didn't matter. Only Ava. But peace is rarely permanent. Her phone buzzed. The first time she ignored it. Could wait. She assumed it was a message from a friend or family member, perhaps her mother or her husband, Michael. He hadn't made it to the hospital in time. Work, he had claimed. An unavoidable meeting. She understood, or at least she told herself she did. Emma had always been good at justifying the actions of those she loved. The phone buzzed again. Then again. Emma's mother, who sat beside her, picked it up. The expression on her face shifted. Subtle at first, her lips pressed tightly together, her shoulders tensed. But as her eyes scanned the screen, the color drained from her face. Emma's stomach twisted. Something was wrong. Very wrong. What is it? Emma's voice cracked. Her mother hesitated, clutching the phone as if shielding Emma from whatever was on the screen. But Emma didn't need protection. Not now. Not after all she had endured. With trembling hands she reached for the device. Her mother reluctantly handed it over. Emma's eyes fell on the message. A photo. Michael's face. Familiar. Too familiar. His bare chest against a tangle of sheets, and next to him her sister Sarah, smiling, smirking, their limbs entwined as if the act of betrayal was something to celebrate. Beneath the image, a single line of text burned through Emma's mind. Good luck being a single mother. I've taken your husband. Emma's vision blurred. Her ears rang. She blinked, willing the image to disappear, but it remained, unrelenting, proof of the unimaginable. The betrayal wasn't just in the act. It was in the timing. Sarah had waited, striking with perfect precision, while the phone buzzed again. Another message. You thought you were better than me. Now look at you. Emma's hand shook. Michael. She needed to hear his voice. She needed to understand why. She dialed, the sound of the ringing echoing in her mind. 1 ring, 2, 3. On the 4th he answered. Emma. His voice was flat, emotionless. There was no panic, no remorse. How could you? Her voice cracked, the weight of her pain breaking through. How could you do this to me? To Ava. For a moment there was only silence. Then with an almost rehearsed calmness he spoke. I fell in love with Sarah. She was there for me when you weren't. Emma's breath caught. The cruelty of his words sliced through her. She wanted to scream at him, to demand answers, to make him feel even an ounce of the pain that consumed her. But what was the point? The man she loved no longer existed. In his place stood a stranger, one who had abandoned her in every conceivable way. You don't get to justify this, she spat. You don't get to destroy our family and pretend it's my fault. I'm sorry, he murmured, but the words rang hollow. She ended the call. There was nothing more to say. In the days that followed, the weight of the betrayal bore down on her. She moved mechanically, tending to Ava, forcing herself to eat, to breathe. Her parents became her anchor, their unwavering support the only thing that kept her from drowning. But the questions remained. How long had it been going on? How many moments had been stolen from her, twisted into something vile? Sarah made no attempts to apologize. Instead, she basked in her triumph, as if winning Michael was some twisted prize. Emma had expected anger. She had expected pain. But what she hadn't anticipated was the emptiness, a hollow ache that gnawed at her, whispering that she had been a fool to believe in love, in family. But as she cradled Ava in her arms, the soft warmth of her daughter's breath against her skin, a new resolve took root. The cracks may have shattered the foundation of her marriage, but they would not define her. Emma would not be broken, not by Michael, not by Sarah. She would rise, for Ava, for herself. And as she stared into her daughter's innocent eyes, she vowed that the betrayal would not be the end of her story. It would be the beginning of something stronger. The cracks had been there all along, but from the ruins she would rebuild. Emma's body was still weak from childbirth, but the pain that tore through her now had nothing to do with labor. It was a different kind of agony, the type that spread through every nerve, consuming her from the inside out. The image of Michael and Sarah was seared into her mind, mocking her every time she closed her eyes. She had endured the physical torment of bringing life into the world, only to have her own ripped apart in the most calculated betrayal. The hospital room, once a sanctuary of new beginnings, now felt like a prison. The walls seemed to close in, suffocating her beneath the weight of what she'd just seen. Her mother hovered nearby, concern etched deeply into her face, but even the warmth of her presence couldn't stop the numbing cold that swept through Emma's veins. She clutched the phone tighter, her knuckles white. The memory of Michael's voice from their last call echoed in her ears. That detached tone. No guilt, no remorse, just a hollow excuse wrapped in the flimsy justification of love. Love. Emma nearly laughed at the absurdity of the word. What kind of love thrived in the shadows of betrayal? What kind of man could hold his wife's hand as she carried his child, all the while sharing his bed with her sister? She wanted to scream. She wanted to tear the sterile sheets from the hospital bed, to throw the flowers that sat cheerily on the bedside table. But even as the rage threatened to consume her, she stayed still. Ava, swaddled in soft blankets, stirred gently in the bassinet beside her. That tiny, innocent face, so unaware of the devastation that had unraveled in the span of mere moments. Emma's mother reached out, her fingers brushing lightly against Emma's arm. "Sweetheart, I'm so sorry." The words were barely a whisper, but they carried the weight of 1,000 unspoken apologies. "I should have seen it," Emma choked out. Her voice cracked, the tremble betraying the strength she tried so desperately to cling to. "I should have known." But how could she have? Michael had been her anchor, the man who kissed her forehead every morning, the man who held her when her anxieties crept in during the night, the father who whispered promises to Ava through her growing belly. She had trusted him. And Sarah? Sarah had grown up beside her. They had shared childhood secrets, tangled limbs in the backseat of their parents' car on family road trips. Through every argument and every bitter rivalry, a twisted sense of loyalty had remained. Until now, the hours dragged on. Nurses bustled in and out, checking on both Emma and the baby, but the sterile smiles and routine questions barely registered. The only thing Emma could feel was the tightening in her chest, the desire for answers gnawed at her. She needed to hear his voice again, to look him in the eyes and ask him why. Her fingers hovered over the phone, the weight of indecision pinning her in place. Every logical part of her screamed to let it go. What good would it do? No explanation could undo what had been done, but the ache for closure overpowered reason. She pressed the call button. The phone rang, once, twice, then a click. "Emma," Michael answered, his voice devoid of warmth. "Why?" It was the only word she could manage. The tears that threatened to spill trembled on the edge, but she swallowed them down. She wouldn't break. Not yet. There was a pause on the other end. She imagined him standing there, perhaps in their shared bedroom, the remnants of his betrayal still lingering in the air. Did he regret it? Did he even care? "I told you." Michael's voice came low, laced with something unsettlingly indifferent. "I fell in love with Sarah." The word stabbed through her. "You didn't fall in love. You destroyed everything. You destroyed our family. You weren't there for me, Emma," he shot back. "After my brother died, I needed someone. You were so wrapped up in the pregnancy and planning everything." Sarah, she understood. Emma's jaw clenched. The twisted justification, the gall of him to frame his affair as a consequence of her devotion to their unborn child. "I was carrying our daughter, Michael, and you were sleeping with my sister. I didn't plan for it to happen," he said, his voice wavering. "It just did." She wanted to scream that affairs didn't just happen. There were choices, decisions made, moments when he could have stopped, but instead he had indulged. And Sarah, how eagerly she must have welcomed him. "I want a divorce," Emma said, the words leaving her lips with a finality that even surprised herself. There was no hesitation, no lingering hope for reconciliation. Whatever love had once existed between them had been obliterated the moment he chose betrayal. Michael was silent. She imagined him clenching his jaw, grappling with the reality of her resolve. But there was no plea, no desperate apology, just a single cold response. "Fine." And then the line went dead. Emma's hand trembled as she lowered the phone. The emptiness that followed was unbearable. She wanted to collapse, to scream into the void, but Ava stirred once more, her soft whimper slicing through the air. Instinctively, Emma reached for her daughter, pulling her into her arms. The warmth of Ava's tiny body grounded her. She inhaled deeply, the soft scent of newborn skin filling her senses. "I'm here, baby," she whispered, pressing her lips against Ava's forehead. "I'm here." Days passed, but the pain refused to loosen its grip. The betrayal bled into everything. Emma's parents were devastated. Her mother, though heartbroken, became her unwavering support. She stayed by Emma's side, helping with Ava and tending to her daughter's wounds the best she could. Her father, however, raged. He had always been a man of quiet strength, but the fury that flashed in his eyes upon hearing the truth was unlike anything Emma had ever seen. "He's not welcome in this house," he had declared, "and neither is Sarah." But Sarah didn't seem to care. The messages continued, taunts disguised as triumph. She reveled in the destruction she'd caused, her bitterness festering into something monstrous. She paraded Michael like a trophy, flaunting their twisted relationship across social media, daring the world to judge her. Yet Emma remained silent. She wouldn't give Sarah the satisfaction of a reaction. There was no point in engaging with someone who thrived on the misery of others. Her focus remained on Ava, on the tiny fingers that curled around her own, the wide eyes that gazed up at her with innocent wonder. Michael predictably made no effort to fight the divorce. He wanted freedom, and Emma was more than willing to give it to him. The legal process began swiftly, and though the days felt like an endless blur of paperwork and court dates, Emma found solace in the knowledge that she was reclaiming control. But no legal document could erase the scars. The nights were the hardest. Alone in the dark, the memories crept in. The echo of laughter that once filled their home, the whispered promises of forever, the sharp sting of betrayal. Yet even through the tears, a quiet strength stirred within her. Michael and Sarah had tried to break her. They had expected her to crumble. But Emma was still standing, and with every passing day, the cracks beneath her feet began to mend. The breaking point had come and gone, but now it was time to rebuild. Emma's world had shattered, but the cruel truth was that life did not pause for grief. The sun still rose, the clock still ticked, and Ava still needed her. There were diapers to change, bottles to warm, and lullabies to sing. Every day brought new demands, leaving no space for the luxury of falling apart. She had returned to her parents' house, the same house she grew up in, though it felt like a distant memory now. The bedroom walls, once covered in teenage posters and remnants of a simpler past, were now bare. A crib stood beside the bed, a reminder that she was no longer just a daughter but a mother. Emma tried to find solace in that. She had Ava. That was enough. It had to be. Her parents had welcomed her with open arms, though the pain lingered in their eyes. They tiptoed around her, offering soft words of comfort and gestures of kindness. Her father was stoic, his anger simmering just beneath the surface, while her mother oscillated between tears and forced strength. They both grieved in their own way, not just for Emma, but for the daughter they had also lost in Sarah. It wasn't long before the legal process began. Michael had not contested the divorce. He had signed the papers with the same indifference he had shown when she confronted him. There was no fight for custody, no objections, just signatures on paper that officially severed what little remained of their marriage. Emma was awarded primary custody of Ava, though the judge granted Michael visitation rights. The thought of handing her daughter over to him, even for a few supervised hours, gnawed at her. But the law was not concerned with her pain. It was concerned with protocol. Michael, however, was hardly interested in claiming his fatherly rights. Weeks passed without a single attempt to see Ava. The once devoted husband who had kissed Emma's growing belly and whispered promises to their unborn child had vanished. In his place was a man she no longer recognized, one who seemed far too comfortable in his new life, a life that undoubtedly involved Sarah. Emma avoided thinking about them. She refused to grant them space in her mind, but the whispers reached her nonetheless. She had deleted social media, blocked numbers, and ignored mutual acquaintances, yet fragments of their existence found her. Someone would mention Sarah's name at the grocery store. A distant relative would awkwardly ask how she was holding up. It was impossible to escape the shadow of what had been done, but Emma was determined. She would not let bitterness consume her. Every ounce of strength she had was poured into Ava. Her daughter became her anchor, tethering her to the present. When the memories threatened to drown her, she focused on the tiny hands grasping her fingers, the wide eyes filled with innocent wonder. Ava was her purpose now. Therapy became a lifeline. At first, Emma was hesitant. The idea of peeling back the layers of her pain and exposing them to a stranger seemed unbearable. But her therapist, a gentle woman named Dr. Reynolds, created a space where the weight of her sorrow could finally be set down. Week by week, Emma unraveled the tangled mess of betrayal, grief, and anger. There is no timeline for healing, Dr. Reynolds had told her, but each day you choose to keep moving forward, you're reclaiming a piece of yourself. Emma clung to those words. Reclaiming herself. That was the goal. Not just surviving but rebuilding. She began to make small changes, walking through the park with Ava in the mornings, savoring the crisp air and the laughter of other children. She enrolled in a local mom and baby yoga class, where she met other mothers who, though strangers at first, quickly became a support network. Her parents too found their own ways of healing. Her mother doted on Ava, showering her with love that softened the sting of all they had lost. Her father busied himself with projects around the house, though Emma could see the tension that lingered in his eyes. The betrayal had wounded him deeply, especially the knowledge that his eldest daughter had chosen to destroy the family's fragile bonds. Sarah had reached out only once, a half-hearted attempt to justify her actions. Emma had blocked her without hesitation. There was no space for Sarah in her life. Not now, maybe not ever. And then there was Michael. His absence was both a relief and a reminder. The man she had once planned a future with was now a ghost. He paid child support on time, his only tangible acknowledgement of Ava's existence. Yet the money felt meaningless. Emma didn't want his financial contributions. She wanted the father he had promised to be. But that man was gone. On the rare occasion that Michael did reach out, his words were hollow, apologies that came far too late, excuses masked as explanations. He spoke of regret, but regret meant nothing without action. He claimed Sarah had been a mistake, that he had been lost in his grief and loneliness. Emma refused to entertain his self-pity. She had grieved too. She had been lonely too. But she had not betrayed. She had not destroyed. Still, the emptiness lingered. Nights were the hardest. Once Ava was asleep and the house grew quiet, the memories crept in. Emma would lie awake staring at the ceiling, the echo of Michael's voice reverberating in her mind. She remembered the way he had traced patterns along her spine as they talked about baby names, the way he had laughed, a low rumble that once made her feel safe. Those moments haunted her, but they were just that, moments, fleeting fragments of a life that no longer existed. It wasn't until months later that Emma caught a glimpse of something unexpected. Hope. It came in small doses, like the laughter that bubbled from Ava when she took her first steps or the sense of accomplishment when Emma returned to work. She had missed her career, the structure, the sense of purpose. Her colleagues welcomed her back with open arms, their support unwavering. It felt good to be something other than the woman who had been betrayed. She was a mother, yes, but she was also Emma, and Emma was still standing. Support came from unexpected places. Old friends she had drifted from reappeared, offering comfort without judgment. Her best friend, Lily, became a constant presence, reminding Emma of the joy that still existed in the world. There were movie nights with bowls of popcorn, walks along the waterfront, and hours spent reminiscing about the days before betrayal had cast its shadow. But perhaps the most profound change was within herself. Emma had learned to sit with her pain without letting it consume her. She no longer searched for explanations that would never come. Instead, she accepted that some wounds would never fully heal, and that was okay. Healing wasn't about forgetting, it was about carrying the scars with grace. She often thought about Ava's future. One day her daughter would ask questions. She would want to know why her father wasn't around. Emma didn't have all the answers yet, but she knew one thing for certain. Ava would grow up surrounded by love. She would never question her worth or the strength of the woman who raised her. And as Emma stood by the window one evening, watching the sunset cast golden hues across the sky, she felt something stir within her. It wasn't the pain that had once consumed her. It wasn't even anger. It was peace, a fragile, tentative peace. The pieces of her life were no longer shattered beyond repair. They were rearranged, forming something new, something resilient, something beautiful. And Emma knew without a doubt that this was just the beginning. The call came on a gray afternoon, just as Emma was rocking Ava to sleep. The steady rhythm of the chair creaked softly beneath her, and the warmth of her daughter's breath brushed against her neck. For a fleeting moment the world felt calm, but then the phone buzzed. She wasn't expecting anyone, and for a second she debated ignoring it. Yet something about the persistent vibration gnawed at her. When she glanced at the screen, the name glaring back at her twisted her stomach. Michael. It had been months since their last strained conversation, and she had no desire to break the silence. His absence had become the one predictable constant in her life. He never asked about Ava. The child support deposits arrived like clockwork, but that was the extent of his involvement. Emma had learned not to expect more. She no longer wasted energy on the aching question of why. Some people simply didn't choose to love the way a parent should. But he was calling now, and her hands trembled as she answered. Emma. His voice was flat, almost cautious. She steadied herself. What do you want, Michael? There was a pause, and for a brief moment she thought he might hang up. But then he spoke words that knocked the air from her lungs. Sarah's pregnant. The room tilted. Ava stirred against her chest, her tiny fist clenching the fabric of Emma's shirt. Emma blinked, forcing herself to stay grounded. She didn't want to give him the satisfaction of a reaction, but the words echoed relentlessly. Sarah's pregnant. Why are you telling me this? Her voice came out low even. She wouldn't break. Not now. Michael hesitated. I thought you should hear it from me. A bitter laugh escaped her. Consider it done. She ended the call before he could say another word. Her heart pounded as she held Ava tighter, the steady hum of the baby monitor now the only sound in the room. It shouldn't have hurt. She had prepared herself for the reality of Michael and Sarah's twisted relationship, but the finality of it, the permanence, left her hollow. Days passed, but the weight of the news followed her. She didn't tell her parents right away. She wasn't ready for their sorrowful looks or the inevitable reminders of how far Sarah had fallen. Emma needed space to process it herself, to untangle the complicated emotions that pulled at her. Anger, that was the easiest to grasp. The sheer audacity of Sarah building a life from the wreckage she had caused. Then came the guilt, a flicker of shame for even caring. She had Ava. She was free from Michael's cruelty, from Sarah's venom. Why should it matter? But it did, not because she wanted Michael back. That door had closed the moment she signed the divorce papers. It mattered because it was yet another reminder that consequences didn't always fall where they belonged. Sarah had taken everything from her, and now she was being rewarded with a child. Family, the very thing she had tried to destroy in Emma's life. It wasn't until the whispers began that Emma realized just how quickly the news had spread. Her phone lit up with messages from mutual acquaintances, some offering sympathy, others thinly veiled curiosity. People wanted the drama. They wanted to see how the wronged wife would react. Emma refused to give them the satisfaction. But then another call came, this time from her mother. Sweetheart, I need to tell you something, her mother said, the hesitation in her voice tightening Emma's chest. I already know. Sarah's pregnant. There was a pause. That's not all. Emma's heart pounded. What is it? Michael doesn't want anything to do with the baby. The word struck like a slap. What? Apparently he told Sarah she should reconsider. He said he's not ready for another child. He wants her to terminate the pregnancy. Emma's stomach churned. The hypocrisy of it all was unbearable. Michael had once held her hand and promised to be the best father to Ava. Now, faced with the reality of fatherhood once again, he was running. And Sarah, who had so proudly declared her victory, was now facing the bitter consequences of the life she had stolen. Emma didn't know how to feel. She wanted to hate them both. She wanted to revel in their misery, to see them suffer just as she had. But as much as she tried to cling to that anger, it slipped through her fingers. Because beneath it all, there was something else, pity. Sarah had built her world on ashes, thinking she could find happiness in the ruins. But now she stood alone, with the man she had betrayed, her sister, for turning his back on her, and the child she carried, innocent and undeserving of the mess it had been conceived into, would pay the ultimate price. Weeks passed without further word from Michael. Emma busied herself with work and Ava, finding comfort in the mundane routines of motherhood. Therapy remained her refuge, a space where she could unravel the knots of lingering resentment and grief. One evening, just as the sun dipped below the horizon, her phone buzzed once more. An unknown number. She almost didn't answer, but curiosity won. Emma. The voice on the other end was unmistakable. Sarah. Emma's fingers tightened around the phone. What do you want? I need to talk to you. There's nothing left to say. Sarah's voice cracked. Please, just hear me out. Emma considered hanging up. She owed Sarah nothing, and yet there was a small part of her that wanted to hear what she had to say, to understand how the sister who had once braided her hair and whispered secrets beneath the covers had become a stranger. Fine, Emma said, her voice cool. Talk. Sarah inhaled sharply. I'm pregnant, and Michael doesn't want the baby. He said it was a mistake. He won't support me, and you expect sympathy. No, Sarah whispered. I don't expect anything, but I thought, maybe you could understand. You know what it's like to be alone, to have a child and... Don't Emma cut her off, her voice trembling. "You don't get to compare what you did to me to what's happening to you." "I'm sorry," Sarah said, the words spilling out desperately. "I was wrong. I was jealous. I thought if I took something from you I'd finally feel like I won. But I didn't win, Emma. I lost everything." Emma's chest ached. Part of her wanted to believe Sarah's remorse, but the wounds were too deep, the betrayal too severe. "I forgave you once," Emma said quietly, "and you destroyed me. I won't make that mistake again." "I don't expect forgiveness," Sarah whispered, "but I had to try." Emma's fingers hovered over the phone, the weight of years of hurt pressing down on her, but she no longer felt anger, just exhaustion. "Goodbye, Sarah." She ended the call. That night, Emma stood by Ava's crib, watching the gentle rise and fall of her daughter's chest. The past no longer defined her. Michael and Sarah had made their choices, and now they would face the consequences. But Emma, she had chosen differently. She had chosen to protect her daughter, to build a life rooted in love and resilience. And as she leaned down, pressing a kiss to Ava's forehead, she whispered the only promise that mattered. "We're going to be okay." The days blurred together, marked not by the heavy shadow of betrayal, but by the simple rhythm of motherhood. Emma no longer woke with the ache of unanswered questions gnawing at her. The bitterness that once threatened to consume her had begun to loosen its grip. There were still moments of sadness, a fleeting thought of what could have been, or the sting of memory she hadn't yet learned to let go, but they no longer defined her. Ava grew quickly, her laughter echoing through the small house Emma had rented a few miles from her parents. The walls, once bare and unfamiliar, now bore the warmth of photographs capturing the everyday beauty of their life together. A picture of Ava's first wobbly steps, her tiny hands reaching for Emma's outstretched arms. A candid moment of her daughter's face smeared with cake on her first birthday. These snapshots weren't just memories. They were proof that joy had found its way back to Emma, even after everything. Therapy remained a constant. Each session chipped away at the hardened shell she had built around herself. Reynolds often reminded her that healing was not a straight path, but a winding road that required patience. Some days Emma felt like she had conquered the worst of it. Other days she found herself overwhelmed by the weight of it all. But the difference now was that she no longer feared the pain. She had learned to sit with it, to understand it, and then release it. Michael rarely crossed her mind. His absence no longer haunted her. The last she had heard, Sarah had given birth to a baby boy. There were no dramatic attempts at reconciliation, no pleas for forgiveness. Sarah's once defiant bravado had crumbled under the reality of raising a child alone. Emma didn't gloat in her sister's suffering, but she also didn't extend any comfort. The choices Sarah had made were hers to bear, just as Emma had faced her own hardships. Michael, on the other hand, remained as distant as ever. He paid his child support like clockwork, but his presence in Ava's life was non-existent. The few supervised visits he had attended were marked by uncomfortable silences and forced smiles. It was clear he struggled to connect, weighed down by the consequences of his own choices. Emma no longer held space for his guilt. She had released him, and in doing so, freed herself. One afternoon, as Emma watched Ava chase Bubbles in the yard, she felt a sense of peace unlike anything she had known before. The sunlight caught the strands of her daughter's golden hair, illuminating her giggles as the bubbles popped around her. Emma smiled, the kind of smile that reached her eyes, a smile she hadn't realized she was capable of after all the heartache. But healing wasn't only about reclaiming joy. It was also about facing the remnants of the past. That opportunity came unexpectedly when Emma received a letter from Michael. The envelope was plain, his handwriting scrawled in a way that suggested hesitation. For a moment she considered tossing it aside, but curiosity won. She opened it carefully, her eyes scanning the words. He apologized. The letter was long, a tangled attempt to explain himself. He spoke of regret, of the emptiness that followed once the allure of forbidden love had faded. He admitted that losing Emma and Ava had shattered him in ways he hadn't anticipated. He acknowledged the pain he had caused, not just to Emma but to his daughter, a child he had all but abandoned. But Michael's words did not seek to undo the past. There was no expectation of reconciliation, no grand plea for forgiveness, just the raw admission of a man who had fallen short and was left to face the wreckage. Emma read the letter twice, her emotions shifting with each word. Part of her wanted to crumble under the weight of it, to mourn the man she had once loved. But another part, the part that had grown stronger with each passing day, simply felt free. She no longer needed his remorse to validate her own healing. She had already found her closure. Weeks turned into months, and the grip of the past loosened further. Emma built a life that was no longer defined by the betrayal that had once consumed her. She found herself rediscovering old passions, writing again, something she hadn't done since her blogging days. At first her words were hesitant, stumbling across the page like a newborn fawn, but soon they gained strength, flowing with the raw honesty that only someone who had endured heartbreak could convey. Her blog, once dormant, became a space for her voice. She wrote about resilience, about finding joy after pain. Readers responded, sharing their own stories of loss and healing. Emma realized she was not alone, that the wounds of betrayal were not hers to bear in solitude. There was power in the collective strength of those who had endured and emerged on the other side. Her parents remained her unwavering support. Her father, though still scarred by Sarah's actions, had softened with time. He cherished his role as a grandfather, delighting in Ava's every milestone. Her mother, too, had found a sense of peace. Though she still mourned the fracture in their family, she had accepted that some wounds could not be mended. Then there was Lily, Emma's steadfast friend who had been her anchor through the storm. Lily never let her retreat too far into the shadows. She dragged Emma out for coffee dates and park walks, reminding her that laughter was still allowed, even after heartbreak. One evening, as Emma tucked Ava into bed, she lingered by the crib, brushing a stray curl from her daughter's forehead. Ava stirred slightly, her lips parting in a contented sigh. The overwhelming love Emma felt in that moment was immeasurable. "You're my everything," she whispered, her voice catching, "and I promise you I'll always be enough." Emma no longer feared the future. She no longer questioned whether she would ever love again, or if the scars on her heart would keep her guarded forever. She understood now that healing wasn't about erasing the pain. It was about learning to carry it without letting it define her. One morning, while sipping her coffee, Emma opened her laptop and began typing once more. The words came effortlessly, spilling onto the screen as though they had been waiting for this very moment. "There was a time when I thought I would never feel whole again. I believed that betrayal had stolen the best parts of me, but I was wrong. The cracks in my heart did not break me. They made room for something new, strength, resilience, and most importantly, hope. If you're reading this and you're still standing in the rubble wondering how you'll ever rebuild, I see you. I know the weight you carry, but I also know that one day the weight will lessen. You will wake up and realize that the sun still rises, that laughter still exists, and that joy will find you again. You are not what was done to you. You are what you choose to become." Emma hit publish, the sense of release washing over her. She had no idea who would read her words, but it didn't matter. What mattered was that they were hers, a testament to her journey. And as Ava's laughter rang through the house once more, Emma knew without a doubt that she had chosen to become something beautiful. She had chosen to heal, and in that choice she had won. In the end, Emma's story was not one of defeat, but one of resilience. What began as a nightmare of betrayal and heartbreak transformed into a testament of her strength and unwavering determination to rebuild her life. From the moment she held Ava in her arms, she knew she had a choice: to be consumed by the pain or to rise above it. And Emma chose to rise. The betrayal by her husband Michael and her sister Sarah could have defined her. It could have left her bitter, lost in the shadows of what she had lost. But instead, it served as the catalyst for her rebirth. Through the tears, the sleepless nights, and the painful memories, she slowly reclaimed her power. She learned that healing is not linear. Some days the weight of the past felt unbearable, while other days the laughter of her daughter reminded her of the beauty still left in the world. Emma's parents stood by her side, witnessing both her lowest moments and her quiet victories. Their love was a constant reminder that family is not solely defined by blood, but by those who choose to stand with you in your darkest times. Her father's resolve and her mother's gentle support became a foundation upon which Emma built her new life. Together they created a home of warmth and safety for Ava, a place where joy could flourish. Therapy was another cornerstone of her healing. Week after week, Emma faced the painful memories she had tried to bury. Through the guidance of Dr. Reynolds, she confronted the lingering questions that haunted her. Why had Michael betrayed her? Why had Sarah, her own sister, been so consumed by jealousy? While she never found every answer, she came to accept that closure did not have to come from those who hurt her. True closure came from within. Michael's letter of apology had arrived like an unwelcome ghost from the past. He spoke of regret, of the emptiness that followed his choices. But by then, Emma no longer needed his validation. She understood that his actions were a reflection of his own failures, not her worth. His absence in Ava's life was a void that Emma refused to let define her daughter. Instead, She poured every ounce of love she had into raising a little girl who would grow up knowing her strength. Sarah's path had taken a darker turn. The sister who had once relished in Emma's suffering now faced the crushing reality of her own choices. Raising a child alone without the support of the man she had sacrificed so much for, Sarah was forced to confront the emptiness that remained. Emma did not celebrate her sister's pain, but she also knew that it was not her burden to carry. Letting go of the resentment was a choice she made not for Sarah, but for herself. Through it all, Ava was Emma's guiding light. Every milestone, from Ava's first steps to her joyful laughter that echoed through their home, reminded Emma of her resilience. The love she poured into her daughter was a reflection of the love she had learned to give herself. And in that love, Emma found her true strength. Lessons from Emma's story. There are many lessons to be drawn from Emma's journey. Lessons that resonate deeply with anyone who has faced betrayal, heartbreak, or loss. First and foremost, her story is a reminder that healing is not about forgetting. The scars of the past may never fully disappear, but they do not have to dictate the future. Emma's decision to confront her pain head-on allowed her to take back control of her narrative. Another profound lesson is the importance of self-worth. When Michael and Sarah shattered her trust, Emma could have internalized their betrayal as a reflection of her own inadequacy. Instead, she learned to separate their actions from her value. Her growth came from recognizing that her worth was not determined by the failures of others. Forgiveness, too, played a vital role. But it wasn't the forgiveness that Michael or Sarah demanded. It was the forgiveness Emma granted herself. For the moments she doubted her strength, for the nights she cried herself to sleep, for the times she questioned whether she could endure. Self-forgiveness is often the hardest to give, but it is also the most liberating. Emma's experience also highlights the significance of support systems. Whether it was her parents, her therapist, or her best friend Lily, each person who stood beside her contributed to her healing. Surrounding yourself with those who uplift and believe in you can make all the difference when facing life's most difficult moments. Lastly, her story serves as a testament to the resilience of motherhood. Despite the devastation she faced, Emma never stopped being a mother. She showed Ava what it meant to be strong, to persevere, and to choose joy even in the face of adversity. In doing so, she broke the cycle of pain and offered her daughter a future built on love and hope. Applying these lessons to your life. If Emma's story resonates with you, know that you are not alone. Pain is universal, but so is resilience. Whatever hardships you may be facing, whether it's a broken relationship, a betrayal, or the loss of something once cherished, remember that healing is possible. Start by acknowledging your pain. It's tempting to push it away, to numb yourself from the ache, but true healing comes from facing it, allowing yourself to grieve, and recognizing the strength within you to move forward. Lean on those who care about you. No one heals in isolation. Allow your friends, family, or support networks to walk alongside you. And if the weight feels unbearable, don't hesitate to seek professional help. Therapy is not a sign of weakness. It is a powerful tool that can guide you through the darkest moments. Most importantly, remember that healing is not a race. There is no timeline for when you should feel whole again. Some days will be harder than others, but every step forward, no matter how small, is a victory. And when you're ready, consider what it means to forgive. Not for those who have wronged you, but for yourself. Letting go of resentment is not about excusing their actions. It's about freeing yourself from the chains of bitterness. A call to support and continue this journey together. If Emma's story has touched you, if it has reminded you of your own strength, or given you hope for what lies ahead, we invite you to join our community. Subscribe to our channel and become part of a space dedicated to resilience, growth, and healing. We believe that stories like Emma's deserve to be shared. Every story of overcoming hardship has the power to inspire others. By supporting this channel, you're not only encouraging the creation of more content like this, but also helping others find the courage to face their own challenges. Hit the subscribe button, leave a comment, and share your thoughts. Let us know how Emma's journey resonated with you. Your voice matters, and together we can create a space of empowerment and support. Thank you for being a part of this journey. Stay strong, stay hopeful, and remember, no matter how broken the pieces may seem, you have the power to rebuild. And just like Emma, you can find joy once more. Subscribe now, and we'll see you in the next story.